Welcome to the first release of BTQ Core. I'm very excited to show you the progress so far on making a quantum resistant Bitcoin protocol. We're very excited about this release. There's been a lot of changes to the protocol so far, and let's jump right into the changes that we've made so far. So the main challenge for a post-quantum Bitcoin that is securable in a post-quantum world is implementing all the changes to Bitcoin Core that can facilitate these way more computationally expensive algorithms. And so on the consensus side, we have made a lot of changes to the block size, how large blocks can be, how large signatures can be, and transactions can be to accommodate the cryptographic algorithms that we are implementing into BTQ Core that can be orders of magnitude more large in size and computationally expensive to produce. So we've been working very hard, and we have now got to a point where we have a release of the initial scaffolding of BTQ Core, and we welcome anyone to come in and start providing contributions if you're interested, or testing the framework, providing your interest in the technology, and we're looking forward to continued development and hopefully release this technology very, very soon in a mainnet form. So let's go through some of the changes we've made so far. A lot of the changes have been on the core protocol at the consensus level, at the mempool level. And so firstly, let's talk about consensus. The main changes we have made are making the consensus portion of the protocol be able to take into account the larger and more computationally expensive cryptographic algorithms like Dilithium, Falcon, and Sphinx that we're integrating into the network. So firstly, we increased the max block serialized size from 4 megabytes to 64 megabytes, which is obviously a much larger serialized block size. And this is to accommodate much larger transaction sizes, because it is way more computationally expensive and requires a lot more data to create a Dilithium signature, but also to verify that signature as well. So it's going to require the blocks to be much larger to accommodate those large signature sizes. Then we also redefined the weight to equal raw serialized byte size. And so we're no longer, for now, having SegWit support in this BTQ release, although we absolutely will be implementing SegWit in a later release that will be coming very soon. Next, we increased the allowance of the script size. And so obviously there's a Bitcoin scripting language, and you can perform relatively complicated transactions using Bitcoin scripting. But because now we're going to be using Dilithium, Falcon, and Sphinx as the cryptography surrounding the security of these scripts, the signature generation and verification steps for these algorithms are much larger. And so we need the scripting language to facilitate these much larger signatures so that you can write complicated and interesting transactions with these new algorithms. And then finally, we also removed BIP141, which is a weight calculation algorithm which will not be compatible with Dilithium, Falcon, and Sphinx as we move forwards. So next we go to the mempool changes that we've made. Again, most of these changes are to do with the size of blocks, the size of transactions, and making them compatible with these quantum resistant algorithms that require a lot more space and a lot more computational complexity to create and verify. So the default block max weight in the mempool will now be 32 megabytes, and this is going to require the BTQ technology to have a beefier set of hardware to run. But as you all know, Bitcoin was developed in 2008, and back then there were much less computationally powerful hardware than there are now, and we think that the technology required to run BTQ is going to be well within the ranges of a hobbyist. It won't require expensive hardware that only the 1% could afford. This is going to be a technology that anyone will be able to run with consumer grade hardware. And also the max standard transaction weight will now be increased to 1 megabyte as well. Another thing that we've made a change to is that script element limits have been increased. So there were very strictly defined limits in the Bitcoin scripting language that are not compatible with these quantum resistant algorithms. So we've had to increase the size of script element limits as well, and we believe that we might have to increase these again once we start integrating some of these quantum resistant algorithms, depending on what we find in our tests and what is reasonable for the sort of scripts that people are going to want to build. So we're going to be able to facilitate, multi-sig transactions, signature verification, hash time lock smart contracts, and things like that. And some of these are quite complicated scripts that already kind of reach the limits of Bitcoin scripting capabilities given the constraints. So because it's been 15 years that Bitcoin's been around, we think it's safe to increase the limits of some of these scripting capabilities quite substantially. The next thing we did is also increase the mempool size itself from 300 megabytes to 2 gigabytes, and we might increase that again given that dilithium, for example, is a couple of orders of magnitude more computationally expensive to verify signatures, so this might increase as well. Next, on the P2P side, we've increased the max protocol message length between nodes to 70 megabytes. And when we do more rigorous testing, these variables might change as well, but we think this is a reasonable size for now so that you can broadcast transactions between nodes with these more computationally heavy quantum resistant algorithms. And yeah, so we've enabled full propagation of PQ era blocks and messages, facilitating them with this larger protocol message length. Then on the RPC side, we've made a lot of changes to how you query certain block data, that kind of thing, now that we have the scaffolding for different quantum resistant algorithms under the hood. And we've also removed some of the legacy assumptions around size and v-size when it comes to SegWit and witness scripts and things like that, just because they're not really relevant to the technology in the modern era for what we're building with this quantum resistant version of Bitcoin with these new quantum resistant algorithms. So there's a lot of code in the Bitcoin core that references old technology and old BIPs that have been overwritten by new BIPs, that kind of thing. And we can remove a lot of that complexity that no longer needs to be there for a modern version of a quantum resistant Bitcoin. Finally, in regtest and testing, we have implemented a fix actually to the regtest where basically if you were spinning up a new version of Bitcoin, you wouldn't have a block height because the Genesis block wouldn't have been built, and so there are some seg faults that you encounter when you try to run regtest without a Genesis block. So we've made some fixes to that, and then also we've added support for generate block, generate to address, and generate blockchain info on the regtest for BTQ regtest. And then we've also changed the names of all of the different chains. So on Bitcoin you have main, test, regtest, and signet, and in a post-quantum Bitcoin we will have BTQ main, BTQ test, BTQ signet, and BTQ regtest. And that is to ensure that the networks stay distinct, and that's for security and also just for transparency. Makes it easier for people to understand what network they're on. That also comes with changes to chain IDs, the ports that these networks are running on, and all of the other scaffolding required to host separate distinct Bitcoin networks. We've also added a bunch of functional testing for these pieces of technology as well, but in the interest of time I won't go too deep into that. There's also still quite a lot of testing to be done. Finally, in this release, the most important part of the release, in my opinion, or at least the most exciting, is we have mined Genesis blocks for the testnet and implemented all the necessary technology for generating the Genesis blocks on these networks. Now, this technology for generating the Genesis blocks has been since removed from Bitcoin Core as of about 2017, 2016, and this was to stop, back in the day, people building Bitcoin forks back when, 2015, 2016, when the interesting thing to do in the altcoin space was to fork Bitcoin, make your own interesting proof of work or proof of stake network, and try to build a community around that. The Bitcoin developers at the time removed the Genesis block creation code from the Bitcoin source in an attempt to stop people essentially forking the network ad nauseum and making a bunch of useless forks of Bitcoin that weren't providing any value. So we've had to re-implement how the Genesis block gets created. That's all been implemented, and we have tested that and made a Genesis block for the test network. So that's the release that we are releasing yesterday, and the next steps for us will be rigorous testing of this new set of networks, and we invite anyone who's interested in joining along with that to run their own node, and we can set up all of our nodes together and start interacting as a new network. And then after that, we will start the implementation of some of these cryptographically quantum resistant algorithms, starting with dilithium first. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this was interesting and insightful. If you have any questions or you'd like to get involved, please do contact us. And we're looking forward to showing you the next version, V0.2, coming very soon.